The young and the restless spoilers. Even days after that devastating call from Lily Winters, Nate Hastings still struggled to believe what he had heard. Damian Cain was dead. The man who had once stared down rivals with quiet confidence and possessed a rare blend of defiance and compassion, gone. But what made Damian's death all the more unbearable was the senselessness of it. It wasn't illness. It wasn't fate. It was the brutal result of manipulation, jealousy, and a calculated war waged in the shadows. Nate paced his hotel suite, replaying Lily's voice on speaker again in his mind, low, grief-stricken, but disturbingly composed. "He was trying to protect me," she had said. "He never should have been there. Carter saw him as a threat, because Cain still sees me as a possession." That line echoed in Nate's bones. None of it made sense. Or perhaps all of it made too much sense in the way tragedy often did. Damian had gotten too close, and that intimacy, even if unspoken or unrealized, had ignited something dangerous in Cain. Love had never been enough for Cain Ashby. What he wanted, what he had always craved, was control. And when Damian Cain, an outsider with nothing to lose and the courage to speak truth, walked into the tangled mess of Cain and Lily's unresolved history, the outcome had been as predictable as it was horrific. Damian didn't just challenge Cain's ego, he challenged his myth. And now he was dead. But the task ahead for Nate wasn't processing his own heartbreak. It was the unbearable burden of becoming the messenger. Amy Lewis had to be told. And despite all his years of experience as a physician, of delivering hard truths with tact and care, Nate found himself at a loss. There was no gentle way to explain to a mother that her son, her only child, had been murdered over something as petty and poisonous as territorial obsession. There were no euphemisms strong enough to soften that reality. He found her at dusk, seated alone on the edge of the park bench that had become her daily sanctuary. Amy looked older in that moment than Nate had ever seen her, not physically, but emotionally hollowed out, as though the shadows had begun seeping into her bones. She turned to him with a sad smile, already suspecting something. "You've been too quiet," she said softly. "You're carrying something, Nate. I can see it in your eyes." Nate sat beside her, struggling to find a foothold in the conversation. When she asked about Damian, he hesitated. Not because he doubted the truth, but because once spoken, the words would shatter everything. When he finally said it, when the words "Damian's gone" crossed his lips, Amy didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She simply froze, her breath caught between inhale and exhale, her body a statue of disbelief. Then came the tears, silent at first, and then shaking. She whispered, more to herself than to him, "It should have been me." The phrase tore through Nate's chest. Amy was battling cancer, her health fragile, her prognosis uncertain. She had long accepted that her time might be short. But never, not once, had she considered outliving her son. "That's not how this was supposed to go," she murmured. I hoped that I would go first. That he would be the one left behind to be strong." He was always strong. Nate reached for her hand. "You were strong too," he said. "You gave him something to fight for. He was trying to protect Lily, yes. But he was trying to protect you too. That was who he was." Amy nodded, but her sorrow was a tidal wave, swallowing everything rational. Her body trembled not just from emotion, but from the sheer strain grief placed on her already weakened frame. Nate began to worry. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale. The emotional trauma could threaten her stability in ways more dangerous than any physical wound. She had fought so hard against the cancer, with grit and hope. But pain like this had a way of sinking into the bones, weakening the soul. Meanwhile, in Genoa City, the storm began to turn back toward Cain Ashby. Victor Newman had watched silently for long enough. The empire he built had endured countless attacks, but the involvement of Damian Cain's death struck a personal chord. The Newman family was no stranger to tragedy, but when a young man's life was extinguished because of twisted emotional warfare, And when his daughter Victoria and son Adam had both come under threat through Cain's web of manipulation, Victor's restraint vanished. He summoned his most trusted legal and corporate investigators, reactivated contacts from his early days in Europe, and quietly began unearthing every contract, every false document, every shell company linked to Cain's Dumas identity. The results were damning. Money laundering, false partnerships, even ties to espionage. But more than that, Victor found the proof he needed that Cain's assistant Carter had been in contact with people responsible for eliminating threats. Damian wasn't the first target, but he was the first one who had gotten too close. Victor didn't confront Cain in public. He didn't make statements to the press. Instead, he sent one message, through a mutual contact: "You've made a mistake, and now you've invited me into your war." For Cain, those words meant only one thing. He had become the hunted. Cain, who had spent years playing both hero and victim, now found himself exposed, unprotected. And as the pressure mounted, it became harder to deny what Jack Abbott had said from the beginning: if Cain had just stayed out of it, none of this would have happened. Jack, once a rival to Victor, had seen Cain's hunger for power with clear eyes. He had warned others. And now, standing at the edge of the carnage, even he took no pleasure in being right. "He brought it on himself," Jack muttered, reading the latest report on Damian's death. "Now he'll pay for it." Amy remained in France a little longer, tending not just to her son's memory but to her own survival. She saw specialists. She accepted Nate's help, slowly. And while the pain had not lessened, it had begun to take form, shaping itself into purpose. She knew now what she had to do. Damian had tried to protect Lily. Damian had tried to expose Cain. Damian had died for love. So Amy would live and fight for justice. Carter, still arrogantly dismissive, believed she would fade into grief. But Amy wasn't fading. She was sharpening. And if Damian truly had died, then everything he had left behind would be his voice, and she would become its echo. Let me know if you'd like to develop the next section. Amy publicly confronting Cain in court or through the media, Nate uncovering more clues suggesting Damian faked his death, Victor launching an all-out corporate assault on Dumas Enterprises, or Cain trying to flee Genoa City as the walls close, and we can continue building this saga into its most explosive climax yet. Absolutely. We're now reaching the most volatile and suspenseful stage of the narrative, where truths begin to unravel and the thirst for revenge grows stronger, yet the path forward is uncertain and fraught with danger. I'll now continue the long-form, immersive narrative focusing on Carter's disappearance, the chaos following his crimes, the shadowy mastermind behind it all, and Amy's evolving strategy in Nice, not as a grieving mother, but as a calculating force seeking justice. Here is the next powerful installment. As chaos rippled outward from the revelation of Damian Cain's death, another darker thread began to consume attention across Genoa City and beyond: the sudden disappearance of Carter. Once known merely as Cain Ashby's quiet, obedient assistant, Carter had transformed in a matter of weeks from background shadow to central figure in a violent and bloody narrative. His hands were no longer clean. He wasn't just suspected of eliminating Damian. He was now wanted for the brutal stabbing of Nick Newman, an act that had left one of the Newman family's pillars fighting for his life, bleeding out on marble floors in a villa built on lies. The police had launched a global manhunt. Warrants were issued. Airport terminals were monitored. Port authorities were notified. Yet Carter had vanished as if the earth had swallowed him whole. Some reports, unverifiable and shrouded in speculation, claimed he had taken his own life. A body had been pulled from the Mediterranean near Marseille, the face unrecognizable, the features bloated from the sea. But no official confirmation ever came. Dental records didn't match. DNA couldn't be retrieved. Within hours, whispers began again: Carter hadn't died. He had escaped. And if that was true, the question on everyone's lips became more terrifying than the last: who helped him? Because Carter, for all his ruthlessness, was not the mastermind. His loyalty had always been to someone else. That much had been evident from the beginning, the way he reported back after every conversation, the way he moved only when instructed. He had never been driven by ideology, revenge, or even self-preservation. He was a weapon, not a mind. A hand, not a brain. And now, with his actions detonating across the city like a chain of explosives, someone else's identity was slipping dangerously close to the surface. Someone had given the order to kill Damian. Someone had told Carter to eliminate Nick Newman when he got too close to the truth. That person hadn't disappeared. That person was still out there. Amy Lewis understood that more than anyone. She had come to Nice not for closure, and certainly not for peace. Everyone who truly knew her knew that. She had crossed the ocean not to bury her son, but to raise hell. Carter's disappearance hadn't altered her purpose. If anything, it had made her colder, more calculating. Grief had carved out space inside her soul, but it had not made her reckless. She knew what vengeance cost. She also knew it couldn't be achieved by rage alone. Carter was a symptom. The disease lay deeper. Her task now was to follow the trail backward, not to Carter, but to the person who had programmed him like a weapon and then discarded him when things got too hot. She moved through Nice like a ghost, never staying in the same place twice, using aliases tied to old acquaintances she'd met during her years abroad. She visited the morgue again, not to see Damian's body, but to confirm records, to ask quiet questions, to verify that everything added up. But it didn't. The inconsistencies grew by the day. Her son's autopsy had been unusually limited. Surveillance footage from the villa had been erased in a 12-minute window surrounding the alleged time of death. A local courier had reported delivering a sealed envelope to a storage unit rented under a false name that Amy recognized from Damian's old university nickname, a name only mother and son had shared. It was as if Damian had planned not just for his death, but for his resurrection. As for Carter, theories bloomed like weeds. Some believed he had boarded a cargo ship out of Monaco, disguised as a dockworker. Others said he was hiding in Eastern Europe under a new face, protected by the same network that had aided Dumas in years past. But what chilled Amy to her core was a different possibility, that he was still in Nice, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the heat to die down before completing one last task. If that were true, then she wasn't just hunting ghosts. She was breathing the same air as the man who had held the blade that killed her son. Yet Amy never let emotion cloud her strategy. She kept her head down, worked with Nate in secret, and contacted a handful of trusted contacts in the intelligence world, people who owed her favors from years ago, people who weren't interested in headlines but in results. With their help, she quietly accessed Dumas's internal communication archives. The decrypted messages painted a horrifying picture. Long-standing coordination between Carter and several unlisted aliases, encrypted conversations with time-stamped orders matching the timeline of Damian's last known movements. And amid it all, one codename kept surfacing: Icarus, the one who gave the orders, the one who signed the kill. This wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. Amy knew she couldn't act yet, not until she had every piece, not until every lie was surgically stripped from the truth. She couldn't afford a mistake. The man behind Icarus, whether it was Cain himself or someone using him as cover, had access to resources. He had eliminated people before. But this time, his enemy wasn't a reckless young man or a hot-headed executive. It was a mother who had already lost everything, and was now willing to lose what remained to finish the job. Be calm, Amy reminded herself. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. Revenge was not rage. It was discipline. And when the time came, it would be clean, complete, and public. The world would know what had been done to her son. The world would know who had given the order. And Carter, wherever he was, would either answer for his crimes in handcuffs or in blood. So while the city buzzed with uncertainty, While news outlets speculated on suicide and extradition, Amy plotted the next move. Perhaps the final one. Because this wasn't about grief anymore. This was justice, rebuilt from ashes. And everyone who thought Amy Lewis came to nice to mourn would soon learn they were wrong.